All right. So, um, like I said, if you have questions, please, keep them coming in the chat, and we'll address them as we keep going every slide. Don't try to, save them until the end. But now we come to the part of what does a good communication look like? What does a good email correspondence look like, right? And this is the simplest slide you will see in this presentation. And we actually don't have many slides. Shaida Bhai and we thought we would talk more, show fewer slides. But this is the simplest form that you have been studying since second grade, right? Of how do you structure a formal uh, letter or communication. Nothing out of the ordinary here, but you will be surprised how many students get tripped up on this. How many students mess this up because of multiple reasons, even the starting from the salutation. Even with the salutation, they will often mess this up. I have I have known faculty who have little ambiguous names to be addressed as Mr. This. There's no need for a Mr. If it's a faculty, go with doctor, right? Go with doctor or professor. There's no absolutely, and sometimes it's gender neutral names. So there's also been cases where men get referenced as women, women get referenced as men, because we don't understand the gender neutrality of a lot of names from different languages, different cultures. So don't make those mistakes. Stick to the basics, right? Stick to the basics, dear professor, dear Miss Doctor, and last name. That's it. Start with your introduction and interest. Keep it small, keep it short, crisp. 2-3 lines at best, because this is where you basically say, I'm just letting you know what this is about. That's it. You do not have to give a whole background of why you're writing and how you came across their website and why you're everything. No, just 2 or 3 lines about why you are interested, and what you are interested in and what that email is about. Then you talk about background, motivations, and fit. This is the most important part of your communication. This is where you can either lose them or you can win them, right? And this is what the part that's probably going to take you most amount of time to actually to craft, right? And you have to think it through very carefully. This is where the research comes in. Close that, simple request for consideration, sign off. We'll give a sample of what that looks like, right? Dear doctor, yes, Sabaddin, right?
Yeah, so there was a question. I think you already like showed this sample email, because there was a question in the chat, what could be the possible solutions in a polite manner? And I think exactly this is what you are going to show here. And there were a couple of questions before, like how many professors we can contact from the same university, from the same department, from the same field, in the same university.
Yeah, that's a
So
great
these are a
question.
couple of questions.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Those are great questions. So the sample, we'll go through the sample. But the second question, I think, is a really, really important question. And Shaida Bhai will cover that on one of the slides that he will tackle at the end. So I won't spend too much time there, but needless to say, not too many, right? You don't want to write to everyone in the same department. So because obviously they will talk, they will say, oh, this student is really, really interested in me. No, 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 no. This student is really interested in me. So you want to phase it out. Um, and more importantly, you want to do it in sequence, not usually in parallel. So if you write to someone, that person responds back, says, no, thank you, I don't have space, then you can write to the next one in that department or the next one in that department, right? Other universities you can send in parallel, but in the same department, you have to be very, very careful. And Shaidabai will talk a little bit more about it. But structure of an email correspondence, right? And the purpose of this webinar is not to give you the template. because then all of you are going to write the same email, right? Which is exactly what I said on the first slide I covered. Do not write the same email for everyone. Personalize it. So therefore, the meat in the middle, the background, motivations, and fit, that's the part where we are going to leave it open-ended, because we are going to have a conversation right now. What is that going to look like? The salutation, the introduction, you can see very straightforward, boom, boom, boom. What, dear doctor, last name of the professor, this is my name, this is what I'm interested in, and this is why I'm writing to you. That's it. And then get right into your background, motivations, and fit. 1 or 2 lines, not more than that, about who you are, that they give them some background of, oh, this is a good student. Oh, it's okay. Has some achievements. What have you done? More importantly, use that to segue into your research experience. Now, hopefully, many of you have some research experience if you're planning on applying to graduate school. If you don't, you might have, depending on what course you're applying to, you might have internships. That's okay, right? It really comes down to what you are using as a platform to justify your candidature for graduate school. So talk about your experiences in very, very important. If there's anything on this slide that I want you to remember, please remember this, right? When you talk about your research, talk about it in 2 parts. Why you did the project, and then talk about what you did in the project, right? I have seen maybe, I don't know, even hundreds of SOPs or emails over the last several years where students have talked extensively about what they did. But the big question is why? Why? What's the big deal? Why should anyone care? Why should I care about it, as if you're writing it to me? So you have to start with the unmet need you are trying to address, the problem you are trying to solve. You always start with the problem you are trying to solve. That this is a problem that exists today. No one really understands what's going on here. And to address this, I did this, right? I hope that's self, evident, but when you start practicing writing, make sure that also comes through in your SOPs when you're writing SOPs, right? And then you try to draw a link between that faculty member interests and your interests, your background. This is a tricky balance, right? And this is where I'm going to go into that last bullet in the middle, that showcase that you've done your homework, but don't try to explain them their own research. Don't waste space. B, you're basically just making a fool out of yourself by trying to explain to them about, this is how protein synthesis happens in the cell. They don't need to know that, right? It's not an exam. Talk to them about very, very, and this is the balance I was talking about. You talk to them about something that is of specific interest to you, but your balance has to be that you don't overcommit to that. You should not come across as, I am extremely interested in this topic, and send the message that the student is not willing to take feedback. The student will only do what they want to do, and the student is not very flexible in research. That's one problem. The other problem could be, maybe that faculty really doesn't care about that question. And maybe that faculty has a much better question in mind that might blow you away and might get you interested even more. So you've got to keep that. Balance. So you just try. Just 1 second. My 8-year-old daughter just came home and she's screaming her lungs out. So if you can give me 1 second.
Yes, please.
All right, sorry about that. So you try to make sure that you're not overcommitting. You're keeping yourself flexible. You're saying, this is something I'm really interested in. Would love to talk to you more about this. Would also love to hear your ideas. on how you think we can advance this field further and explore potential projects, right? You leave that open so you can have that conversation. Always remember, you may have a brilliant idea, but that professor has been doing this for a long time and thinking about this for a long time. That professor, he or she might have a really, really brilliant idea that might be better than yours. So keep yourself open to what you want to do in graduate school. Finish it off with a very small, crisp, closing, sign off with full name and contact information. That's it. Nothing really complicated. And basic, principle is keep it simple. Keep it simple, right? This is the key. Your communication has to be super simple, right? And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but this is actually the KISS principle that is used in industrial design. And it was coined in the 1970s by the US Navy. And they use the KISS principle as keep it simple, stupid, right? Which is don't overcomplicate if it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. If it can be done easily, simply, do it. And that's how your communication approach should be. Always. All communicated, communication, all writings should always be simple. Do not use bombastic language. This is not a test of your GRE, verbal. Do not try to overcomplicate the project with writing about the control groups and everything else. Do not talk about, the details of how you grew up and how, unless that is an important consideration in your interest, then it's fine. But do not go about complicating your communication. Keep it simple, keep it short, and keep it impactful. I think that's really the key here. So I think with that, Shadabai, I'm going to hand it back to you to close out our conversation, unless there's a question for me that I can take.
There are a couple of questions,
Sure.
and right. So I think both of the questions are on the same page. So it's about how efficient it is to contact faculty when you are making application for a graduate program that is master oriented. For master's program, if you're making application, so how efficient it will be to contact faculty?
Less so, to be honest, because you should still do it because of one reason, right? I'll tell you the most important reason. Typically, coordinations committee or the admissions committee comprises of faculty members, administrators, and a bunch of other people, right? Now, if you've contacted a faculty member and they're impressed with your background, your resume, your interests, and they sit on the admissions committee, you have no idea of knowing who may or may not be. If they sit on that committee, I think that is something that is an absolute advantage. So, so even if you're applying for a master's program, you should do it, but you have to frame it differently. Maybe it will be a component, research will be a component of your curriculum, right? You're not looking for a PhD project. So you have to frame it slightly differently, and you have to talk about, as a master's student, I'm very engaged. I'm very interested in this course that you teach. And I also notice you're doing some research, and I would love to do a project, in your lab. So you frame it differently. You're trying to sell yourself differently for obvious reasons, but the communication piece is still as important. Why you communicate is still going to be equally important. Hopefully that answers the question, Sabah.
Yeah, I hope so, really. And I really like the way you shared with us why, when, and how efficient way to communicate. Like we should figure out these things when we write emails.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move to the next slide?
I think these were the questions
Okay.
for now. Yeah.
Shadab.
Rehan, thank you so much. That was a fantastic, introduction, or you mentioned most of the important points that students must consider when they apply. So I will touch base upon, because I was writing some of the things that you mentioned, and I'll touch upon some of those things while I go along these points that you mentioned here. First of all, Saba, what's the number of the students that are here today?
So they're about 55. They're
Okay,
about 50 to 55.
okay.
Yes.
That's fantastic. I thought there would be only maybe 20 to 25. So that's almost double the number that we expected. As Rehan mentioned, so some of the students who are on, for example, the students who are on the webinar today, so they are the serious, you are the serious people. You are, those people who you must be good in your studies, then you will plan your exams like TOEFL, GRE applications, you are attending seminars, webinars. So you are among the serious students. So that's one of the things that is extremely important. So by the time you by the time you start applying for this fellowship, for the admissions, so you must have done most, 60 to 70% work you already done. The reason being that when you go through the application process, the way we have, Rehan and I, when we founded the organization, the way we framed it, it was meant to be done in such a way that you already, when you qualify SSGIC application, when you get selected, you have done 50 or 60 or 70% of the journey already, because it is going to be the same way. You, first of all, you will do GRE and TOEFL that you don't take into consideration when we select you in this program, but you're already done. You have written many emails, you have written SOPs, you have looked into many things, or you have thought about what is interesting. So your applications are reviewed by many people. Each application is reviewed by 3 or 4 people independently. Then you must have done very well in your 10th, 12th, or graduation, because we take into consideration those things. So you have already done 60 or 70% of the journey. So by the time you start applying, you have already done a rehearsal of that. So unless and until you do some silly mistakes, you'll be in a very good position. Rehan gave you a very good introduction about the number of the applications, whether they are US based or Europe based, and international students who ultimately make it to the programs, we get admission, and communication is going to be something very important. So one of the things that somebody wants to look at your application when you start applying is that how motivated you are. I know when I teach in my department, so I want to look at the students who are motivated. So nobody wants to support a student who's silly or who's lazy, who's not motivated, who doesn't make efforts. One time somebody was telling me when that they were applying for scholarships, and they said, well, when we write SOPs and when we write CVs, so those people who are the sons and daughters of professors or doctors or somebody, they will have an advantage over the ones who are not. So I said, well, you come to a university. For example, that was at Kashmir University. I told him, you are at university, you have access to the computers, you have access to many people, and these people have access to, maybe they are sons and daughters of people who have done, who are professors or something, but nobody is stopping you from looking at the internet, finding the application, finding what should be done, and you have basically the same brain, you have the communication skill. So what stops you from that? So what that means is that those of you who may not have come, who may not be coming from very educated backgrounds, who may not have some of the things that others may have, but who is stopping you from doing the things? Who is stopping you from accessing, talking to people, getting help from people, and also from looking at internet, looking at the samples, and doing some homework. I'll give you an example. We had a student who was doing MSc from my department of biochemistry, University of Kashmir. So she was from basically UP. Her parents are they're doing some, they may be doing some labor work in Kashmir. And so she has done schooling from some place in from high schools and other places, and then got admission in the University of Kashmir. She was among the best, 4 or 5 students, not the best one, but among 4 or 5 students. And I was surprised. I was so happy to see that she qualified 5 or 6 national level exams. What was that? GATE, DBT JRF, then CSR JRF, then ICAR, agriculture JRF, 4 or 5 exams. And she applied to IIT. She didn't want to do, because they are from UP, she didn't want to do PhD in Kashmir. So she came to me, she said, sir, I want to do PhD from some other place close to my home, because ultimately I have to get married and my parents want me to go back. So she does not come from, she's the first student from first person from her family or from her area who has a master. But she cracked all these major exams. I was filled with joy. So I wrote to professor. She was applying in IIT Kanpur, and I wrote. I didn't tell her. I told her. She came to me, sir. How should I frame the email? How should I write something? I told her write 1 or 2 pages. Go to the something what Rehan mentioned. And I wrote a professor without her. She is a very good professor in IT. And I wrote her, this is a student who is applying in your department. She's very good, and I'd be very happy if she could get into your program. That professor told me that I'm sorry, I don't have position this year. And I don't have any openings, and maybe she can talk to, or she can find some other lab. What I mean to say, what motivated me, I didn't even tell her. She got admission in TIFR Hyderabad right now. I mean, a few days ago, and she's still in contact, asking me about the labs she should rotate in. I'm saying what Rehan initially mentioned. What I'm trying to say, you want to help, you want to go out of your way to help somebody, but for whom? Somebody who is motivated, who qualified all these exams. I wrote a couple of people that so she would get admission in a good place. So somebody who looks at your application has to find out, okay, this person is motivated, this person has fire in his or her belly. So that is what you want to show. A few things, I'll come to these points that are mentioned on the screen, but a few things before going into that. Rehan, you will perhaps correct me here. When you apply to PhD, so you generally write to a graduate committee, you don't write to a person, you apply to a graduate school. At that time, when we were applying, we did not write to professors individually. So we submitted an application with the graduate school. And so do you get a chance at this time to write to professors directly, Rehan?
Yeah, Shadabhai, this is a great point because, typically the application is directly to the graduate school.
Right.
It is encouraged now, especially now because, so much information is online that, in parallel or even before you apply to graduate school, you can reach out to professors.
Okay.
What that helps to do is then in your application to the graduate school, if you have had received a positive response from a professor, you can actually write it in your SOP and say, I have already been in touch with Professor X, Y, and Z, and I'm very interested in joining their laboratory. So then the graduate school will check with Professor XYZ to see if there is interest, and that can help with the application.
So a few things I would like to mention. In the US, the culture is that you rotate in the labs. So you go to different labs, and when you get admission to a committee, and then you rotate in the labs. So many times you might want to, so how to choose a lab, although there might be a different webinar on that, but how to choose a lab. In for example, you are in India, you can think about many things. For example, you went to an institute, you are doing rotation, you can find from people that, okay, how this lab is, what's the environment. But if you are applying from here to the US, you will not find about the environment, but you will find its application. That's only thing, publications of that lab. So you can find out your area of interest and the publication record of that lab, and then you can select based on that. Finding, you would probably not know, and the environment of the lab you will not know, but you'll find the applications and the website, and then you can select based on that. But a good thing is that when you will go there, you will rotate in different labs, and you can still change your mind at that point of time, because you will have an idea about how the lab is. So a few things that Rehan mentioned, and I would just like to touch upon that. For example, when you write an email, please do not make it, because you will be attaching, as Rehan mentioned, that you will attach your resume and an SOP with that. But please don't make a repetition of your SOP and CV. You do not want to write that your whole CV, because that is attached there. You will just write, you will write your name, and as Rehan mentioned. I'll start from the top. Salutation, for example, are very important. The person there might be an Indian, he may be a Muslim, or he may be a Hindu, or he may be a Christian, or something like that. Many times we may find that, okay, I will write Assalamu alaikum or Namaste or Namaskar. Please don't do that, because you are going in an international culture. So you don't want people to feel that, okay, you are attracted to them or attached to them because of a country that you belong to, or because of a religion. You don't want to do that. Directly, dear doctor or dear professor, this thing without any religious salutation. That's important. The second thing that Rehan mentioned, perhaps he did not elaborate on that, is a subject. Because Professors or teachers, they get hundreds of emails, not necessarily application emails, and they have very little time to look at that. So if you write in the subject, you write application for PhD or interest in the PhD in your lab, so they might find it interesting. Otherwise, if you miss that, if you do not write subject line or you don't write it appropriately, they might think that's a spam email and they might not open that. What you want to do is that you want to catch somebody's attention, and so that they find 2 minutes to open your email first. So you want to first make sure that they open your email. So subject line should be there, dear professor, and then write a brief introduction. It should not be long. It should not be your life story or biography. You write, I'm dear professor this, I'm my name. Your email will be actually your name as well. But you can still write, I'm this from this place, and then I have done my master's from here, and a little bit of what you have done, and then I'm interested in your lab or in your department because of this thing, because you are working on this area, and then close it. For example, Rehan mentioned at bottom, you write sincerely. Don't write yours faithfully. That in India we write yours faithfully, and you write, for example, I beg to say, please don't do those things. Come straight, keep it simple, and don't also don't flatter you. If you, for example, write to me and you make me feel that I'm a Nobel laureate, you make like that you have fantastic publications and you're some of the best. You are one of the best in the world, you are a world leader. People know their worth, they know. So they will think that you are flattering them and you are lying. So they might not take it very positively. It is good. जैसे रेहान ने कल यहाँ there was a sentence जो आप उन्होंने दिखाया last email में. You are incredible publication. I said, Rehan, that might not, because everybody is not a Nobel laureate, and everybody is not does not have incredible publications. And the labs you may go in, they may not necessarily be publishing in Nature and Science and Cell. So they know their worth, and so you do not want to flatter anybody. So that's also important. So then Rehan also mentioned that you also, when you write an email, whenever I have to write an email, when being a faculty member, if I have to write an email to a collaborator or somebody who's senior, I'll check my email again and see what I have written, if there are any spelling mistakes or I have made any typos or anything, so, or grammar mistake. I'll recheck it before I hit that send. I'll just read it a couple of times with a serious email. And then you want to write the same font, same size font. Don't make any colored. For example, one thing that I forgot to mention, Rehan had mentioned that in his introduction, in that slide, email. For example, don't write an email, for example, hero@gmail.com or goofy@of something. Just write your name. I know in Gmail you may have those numbers 1, 2, 3 or 49 or something. That's fine. And don't necessarily make your birthday as your email ID. For example, Rehan Bakri at 58, meaning that it is my birthday. Don't necessarily, because you'll be using that email for a long time, so you don't want necessarily somebody to know your date of birth or birth year. So make a simple email. If you have not done that earlier, make a new email that is more sensible. And you will start with that. So your email ID should be present your name, salutation we mentioned, and then the email content that we mentioned. So sometimes people might think, okay, writing a color, right at the bottom, like I have Shahida Andrabi, and I'll not write that colored and 2, 3 colors to make it. You are fond of yourself, but others will think that you are silly. Don't do that as well. So if you have a signature at the bottom, that should be simple. Rehan mentioned a very important, and then fonts should be same. I mean, if it is Times New Roman, write Times New Roman or Calibri. Those are some of the common, or Arial. Those are some of the common ones that you write. So don't make a combination of fonts and sizes of fonts or shapes of fonts. Keep it simple the most. Times New Roman, Calibri are important. Then Rehan mentioned a very important point that's very, very pertinent to me. Most of the people, if you did not see my picture, you might think I'm a female because my name is Shaida, not Shahida. Most of the people think, and there are many innumerable types of examples, people think that I'm a woman, and I laugh it over. But you may, so just Rehan mentioned, dear professor this. So Mr. and Mrs. Most of the people who are faculty members are already doctors or professors, so you write that, but not necessarily his or her or she or he. Try to avoid those, or Mr. and Mrs. because you may be you may have some idea about a person is a male or a female, and it may be the other way around. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Then check grammars and other things. So Rehan mentioned most of the things. I'll not elaborate on that because that's we already covered those points. Then also you want to impress person, but don't over impress a person about yourself. Just say like you don't want to flatter a person. Similarly, you don't want to talk about a lot about yourself that I've done this and I will catch the stars of the sky and I'm the best person in the world. Don't do that even, right? Very simple things. Who you are, you write that much. And then don't repeat the things in SOP and CV that you are writing in the email. First of all, the person should open your email, your subject line, and then a couple of paragraphs in the email. Don't overwrite it. And then you say, you write, please find my CV and my SOP attached here. And so and then also what Rehan mentioned, that's very important, both, although there will be a separate session on CVs and SOPs, but it should not be the same. Don't be lazy. So you have to change that one paragraph why you are as tailor-made. Should be personalized that Rehan mentioned. So that one paragraph, why you are interested in a particular lab, you should go to their website, look at that, what they have published, and then relate yourself to that. You are interested in studying cancer biology or cell cycle regulation or ubiquitination because you read some chapters or you did some internship somewhere, or if you're not, if you didn't do internship, even if you, for example, you are interested because you read a paper or you did a presentation or you read an article, and then tell them that okay, you, because you are doing good research in the same field, you are interested in that area. And but please change that every time whenever you write a person. So keep it tailored to them. So every time you write an SOP, you change that one paragraph, or when you write an email, please change that you are interested in a particular lab. Otherwise, you will be telling you the person you wrote a standard SOP and you are sending that somebody else who's doing, so they will say, everybody knows that you are writing to 4 or 5 people. They know about that. You are not writing to only one people, but at least they want to know that you are interested in a particular lab, or 4 or 5 people who are just working in some specific area, you are contacting them. So don't, and your email should not be, okay, sometimes people write, please find your attachment without writing anything. Why should they open your attachment? That means you are not interested in your email. It should be personalized. Your email should be short and crisp, and then please find my CV and SOP attached, but that should be, again, tailor made to the person. So then a few more points that I would like to mention is that, okay, Rehan mentioned in the previous slide. Shaba, can you please go to the previous slide?
Yes.
Yes. So please, so Rehan mentioned a very extremely important point. Please don't do, there is something called plagiarism. Plagiarism is if you repeat the same words, if you repeat the same sentences taken from internet, or there is something that's called self-plagiarism. You wrote something and then you are, for example, if you do publication, you write papers, you don't write your own paragraph again in the next paper. So similarly, now this is a typical example where plagiarism would apply. For example, we gave you a sample. This is not that you should exactly write, because one thing that's a bad practice. The second thing is that if you, they might have received emails from other people as well, and if they see the same word, they know that okay, this is copy and paste, and you are not a serious person. A few things I would like that are extremely important. One is that you should always write your own language. This is just a sample for you what you should be writing about, but it should not be the same thing. So then please don't think that you will write bullet points. They say Rehan ne yahan pe bullet points aap lagaye. Don't write an email or SOP as bullet points, because you are writing a story. This is like a movie. You are writing a movie. You are not showing events. So you will write an email, not as bullet points, but one paragraph should be following. The next paragraph should be logically after the first paragraph. So that's one thing that you must note, that you should not write the same thing. The second thing that someone, there was a question, but Rehan also mentioned that you should not write. When I was applying at Tufts University, I'd applied to 4 or 5 places in the same department. This is not like at AMU, you apply to biochemistry, you apply to botany, you apply to zoology, and you apply to chemistry. And you ultimately want to get admission in as many as you want to maximize your chances. But if you are, when I applied to Tufts University, it was the same building, 5 departments. And then somebody, when I went there, then they told me, are you interested in biochemistry department? Because I saw that you had applied to all the 5 departments. Is it that you don't know which department you are going to? I said, no, I'm actually, because genetics and biochemistry and cell biology look similar, so I was interested in in any of these programs. But they are just like India, में हम हर जगह 4-5 department में जब हम BSc MSc के लिए apply करते हैं, you apply to all these departments. So in one faculty, maybe apply to one department. That which Rehan mentioned earlier, that you have to choose particular 5 departments, 6 departments to that. All over the US, 5-6 universities, or maybe 10 even, but don't in the same department, in the same faculty, don't take every 5-6 departments. So similarly, the worst case would be if you apply to 5 professors in the same department, because just like if an application comes to Rehan and it comes to me, we will most likely talk to each other. And we have done that in SSG's application. Rehan, this application came to me. What do you think about that? So that is the same department, and people talk about it, just like you people will talk among yourselves. And they will come to know, they will think that you are not a serious person. And for example, I am here at Biochemistry Department, Kashmir University. I want, if a student wants to write to me, or if a student wants to talk to me, I want that, okay, the person is interested in me. Not that if he goes to every person and writes to every, I think, well, the person is not interested. So people feel good when they feel that, okay, a person is interested in a particular department. So as you had mentioned, you had a question that parallelly, can you write to 5 or a few people in the same department? No, because they will come to know and they will think that you are not a serious student. So that you should not do. So, okay, now I will cover Rehan also mentioned about the flexibility. So you do not want to get somebody feeling that you are interested in only this thing in the world. So you can keep it a little bit flexible so that the person also gets a feeling that, okay, you are not strictly bent upon doing only in a particular very specific thing. So you want to keep it a little bit of flexibility as well. And then Rehan also mentioned, I want to emphasize on that, don't write a complicated vocabulary. I was once, when I was a 10th class or a 12th class student, I was fond of writing very complicated words and impress somebody. My father told me once, he was a teacher, and he said, can you write I will be on leave. Can you write an application for me, a leave application? He was in hurry and he didn't have time. I opened the dictionary. I started looking at the very tough words. I don't know, remember, I have dear headmaster, I have a very intricate problem at home. For example, the word intricate was very fascinating for me. My father told me the headmaster is going to get very, concerned about me, and he will send a person. What have you written? He will send a person to my home that there is some intricate problem at home. Don't do that. So that was just an example. So similarly, some people have the habit of looking at the internet, and I have a faculty member in my department. He writes the most complicated words. No, as Rehan mentioned, it should be very simple. It should not, you are not doing PhD in English or literature, so you have to write very complicated vocabulary. It should be understood by a common person. The person should not think that you have used a dictionary, or you are trying to make a vocabulary and that you are trying to over impress the person. It should be very simple. So, and then Rehan also mentioned that don't write. I personally get very irritated if people write chat room language. And Rehan has mentioned some of those things, and I'll talk about that. Now I'll come to the bullet points. This was, when we were doing, when Rehan was talking about the things, I wrote many things that I thought is important. And this is now the points that I'll mention now. For example, I have already mentioned a few points. I was not looking at the screen when I was talking, because I was looking at the notebooks that I had mentioned. I had noted down points. But for example, the first point, don't use a non-professional email. I already talked about that. Don't waste your subject line. I already talked about that. Don't write a very long email. I already talked about that. Don't assume gender. Okay, I already talked about that. Don't make spelling mistake. That's already done. Slang, that's what I was trying to mention. I get very irritated. You write kinda, or sorta, or PLC, please, or TA. You are writing to a professor. This is a serious thing. And don't write WhatsApp messages. Don't do things like that. So you write a professional, very good, thorough email, not use any complicated vocabulary. And so I talked about most of these things. Don't use a cookie cut template for everyone. Same thing. A person will come to know that, okay, this person has used the same thing. They can find it out. For example, dear professor. If you don't write dear Professor Bakri, so they will assume, oh, you are written to 5 different or 10 different people, and you are writing, you're sending the same email to everybody. They can find that, they can understand that, so that it should be personalized. And as Rehan also mentioned, that you don't want to don't get emotional that you are interested with a particular person. Sometimes the person, most of the time, people are very polite. They will say, oh, thank you for your application. Your application is very, even if they didn't mean to take you. They'll say, oh, that's a very good application. I'm happy about that you are applying, but unfortunately, I don't have a place in my lab this time, and I'm very thankful to you that you applied and you thought of me. So, but don't take it very emotionally that you think, oh, the person is really interested. They want to basically very politely. They don't want to, for example, in SSGSA emails, you have many of, not you, the ones that you got selected, you got a very good email. But most of the people who did not get selected, we still write at the bottom that, okay, you are some of the best candidates, and please do not think that you are not worth the application, but the number of applications was very huge, and so we have to select very few ones. Even if the application was bad, we still write that because you don't want to discourage the person. You don't want to make a person feel that you are a bad, your application was bad, even if the application was bad. Somebody, a person might write to you that, okay, thank you for your application and interest in my lab. Unfortunately, I don't have space in my lab, maybe in the future, and good luck. So you then start applying to the same person, the person will get irritated. So don't get emotional with that. You, as Rehan mentioned, move on, go to the next person. And then I have already mentioned, don't write to multiple professors. I think I have covered already. I was not looking at the screen. I had this between Rehan, what Rehan mentioned, and then the points that I mentioned that I thought that I should talk about. So I was talking about that, and I have already covered most of the points. And best wishes for your application and admission, and we'll take questions from here.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Haidar Bhai and Rehan Bhai. Thank you very much for this
questions.
quite informative session. So we are good to go for questions, and then I will just scroll back where we were with the last question. So there is a question from Yusra Miraj, from where we can start with. But before we start with questions, so one thing come up with in my mind regarding attachments. What I was just talking about. So whenever you are attaching files, you are contacting to professors or PIs or scientists, remember to include in the PDF form, because the PDF form is
That's
the
good.
safest version of file which travels to the email without getting distorted. Yeah, when you send in Microsoft format, so it can happen that when he or she opens in the computer, it opens differently, and then it could mess up with the whole structure of your document. So always send documents in PDF. So okay, so we are good to go for the
and
question.
Saba, I want to
yeah.
mention another thing here also regarding your
Okay,
attachment,
please.
because this just came to my mind. So
Okay,
regarding the attachment, you might, for example, your SOP you might have at the top the file, even if you have changed the sentences in the body of the SOP, but you might have written, for example, you wrote 5 different applications, and you might have written University of Massachusetts SOP or University of Washington SOP. But when you attached and you sent to one university, but the attachment shows or professor's name, even if the name of the file, the person will think that, okay, this person is written for somewhere else, but then is writing to me. So make sure that you change the name of the file. Okay, back to you. And I was not keeping track of time. I know in the US, Rehan might have to go for the rush to office. I'm sorry if I took longer time, but please, Rehan and Sabah, please manage the time as well. Okay, great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, exactly. And I think with that, I came to again one more idea about how I do. And it's very ideal, like in a file attachment, it's safest like to include your last name. Like, for example, in my case, about Ahmed, I will just include Ahmed as a file name. So it's always safer. And what the content. So let's get back to the question. So there was a question. So what's the best time to contact the professor? When should we start contacting the professor? And then in the same question, like, is it necessary that we should have GRE or TOEFL scores already in hand when we are contacting the professor or not?
Yeah, I can take that. The sooner you can start to contact the professors, the better. That's the short answer. So typically, if you think about your application process is going somewhere between September, October, all the way to November, December, which is when most of the deadlines are. It's always better if you you start off with as soon as your resume, your CV is ready. Your SOP ready is probably a good idea if you have it. If you don't have it ready, it's okay. Sometimes, and I don't know if SSGS is doing a webinar on that, but a research statement is also useful. So as soon as your CV is ready, you should start applying. You do not need test scores. You do not need your letter of recommendations. You do not need your application completed. All you need to do is make sure your CV is ready and you've shortlisted the universities that you are targeting. You should start writing to professors at that time. So I think that is the first question. So, but does that answer the question? I just want to make sure it's answered. Or if did I misunderstand the question?
No, I think you completely answered. That is actually the answer. What they should be knowing about. Like, so we covered like when is the best time, and we need a scores. So we don't need the scores to contact. As soon as the material is there, we should contact. So we go to the next question.